You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
This episode of the podcast is going to be all about how we have to stop talking about our emotions and why it's so important to feel them.
Are we just going to sit here and not talk?
No.
And just feel?
We're going to do this meta experience. You know, stupid metaverse, like, sorry, baby. We're not going to sit and just feel our emotions. We have to talk about them.
I thought that's what this podcast was about.
I know, but we're going to talk about how we're not supposed to talk about them.
Oh.
And how you're supposed to feel them.
Okay. How else can we?
Right? Let's get into the weeds when it comes to
weeds.
talking about our emotions.
It's funny. I wonder if this is going to be like, I'm immediately tired. Like, you're like, what does that have to do? You think we're talking about feeling emotions? And I'm like,
I want to go to sleep now.
Turns out I need a nap. Turns out
I'm not ready to do the
I'm
feeling.
tired and I need a nap. So there's no room for the feeling because I'm going to go take a nap.
Right. So the intention behind this fun, lighthearted episode of the podcast is to literally talk about why we talk about our emotions more than we actually feel them. And we're not just talking about us. Like, the reality is, I think that the vast majority of society and culture works this way, where it's so much more, it's not just like socially accepted to talk about your emotions, which is great, right? Or to think about your emotions. But when it comes to actually feeling those emotions, that is a completely different kind of, it's just not accepted. It's not normal. It's not easy. It's not something that we actually witness very often or is demonstrated for us or that we are even taught.
It's labeled.
Right.
Like being too emotional, dramatic, over the top, attention seeking, ridiculous,
when you first
out of control, all the different things. Like, get over it. Like, all of the, like, what is the one I'm looking for? All of the ways that you get judged, or the stereotypes judged for feeling, actually, when you're in a feeling and feeling a feeling, or you've been doing it for too long, you know, you've been feeling too long, or God forbid, there's also, here's where you know that it's like, just like it's a trap, is that if you don't feel it at all, you know, if you don't feel it long enough or however, then you're also doing it wrong. So there is no actual right way to do it, but they will absolutely tell you that no matter what you're doing, it's wrong.
There is no right way to do it. That's so key, I think, right? Where all of those things that you just described happen all the time.
All the time.
And then how often are we in our heads about how we are feeling the emotion? Like, I shouldn't be feeling this emotion, or I shouldn't be feeling this emotion this strongly, or I should be feeling more. Maybe I'm not, you know, there's so many times where I feel like I'm not appropriately sad for any given, you know, for the given circumstance, that whether it's a funeral or even just like receiving bad news or something like that. And I'm just like, yep, that's bad news.
I feel guilty for not reacting the way
not
that
being
you're
sad enough. How silly, all of these things. Yeah.
Because if you had a meltdown, then they would be like, you'd feel guilty for that.
So we can see and understand, I think, initially why we do this as people. Like, why do you do it? You think?
Why do I do it?
Yeah.
Not because I'm terrified of feeling my feelings, right? It was like, my demonstration was, if you get, your grief will swallow you up and kill you. If you feel your feelings, then you're out of control. You can't do it. You have to shove them down. Feelings are scary. Feelings are bad.
Avoid grief at all costs.
Avoid grief at all costs. At all costs. Even like frozen in fear and never moving, never taking a breath, being terrified is better than being in grief. So feeling my feelings was like, not only like it wasn't received, wasn't shown, wasn't demonstrated, wasn't allowed, wasn't like all of these ways, and to where I took on those beliefs too. I'm like, check, don't want to feel grief, will not feel grief. And even like being completely distorted in feelings, thinking about them and like hearing I'm not feeling my feelings. I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah, I am. I'm a mess. Until you actually allow it to, it's still hard. It's still a practice. I still have to practice. I've had a lot of practice lately. Getting a lot of practice. But just feeling everything is, it's terrifying. It's scary. It's so freaking scary and hard. And you think, or for me, right? I think, am I going to get through this? If I actually feel this, am I going to? And yes. If I don't actually feel it, then it stays with me.
Isn't it so fascinating that thought process, like, this is too much to feel. I don't know if I'm actually going to get through this feeling, right? And up until this point in your life, you have gotten through every emotional feeling that you've ever had.
Right.
Like every emotion that has ever crossed paths with you, you've made it
You've
through.
made it through.
And yet you will still question, I don't
Not
think
this
this
time.
one's too big.
This is
This
it.
is too much.
Not going to be able to. And you know, the sad,
That's so funny. I have stuff like that.
you have stuff. I want to hear what you do.
Where I'm like, I'm like, if I really tap in and start feeling whatever, you know, my perception of whatever the feeling is associated with that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to go into these experiences.
Why not?
Because I don't want to feel the feelings with them.
Gotcha.
But it's so funny because I'm like, yeah, that's too much. I can't feel. If I feel all of that, I don't even know what the fear is. You know, I don't think intellectually I think, oh, I'm going to die or that's going to kill me. I think it's just the amount of pain that is in some of those places and in association with some of these feelings. It feels too much. It feels like it will. And I don't even know, like when I say that it'll take me out, I don't even know what that means. Like,
I know what that means.
like it's not, like I said, it's not like I feel like I'm going to die.
Yeah, that's good.
But at the same time, I avoid them at all costs. Mm-hmm. They still feel incredibly scary and frightening. It's like I feel like it's going to break me in some way where I don't feel like I'll come back or I'll be like a shell from, you know, like if I feel this amount of pain, then that's just like now the rest of my life is just grief, sadness, and sorrow. Yeah. I'll never make it back from that.
I really completely.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And this is, you hadn't what?
I hadn't like thought about the fear that I have in association with it. Like you said, right? Where you're afraid to feel these things. And I'm like, what am I actually afraid of? And it's like, oh, it makes perfect sense. But what were you going to say?
I was just going into my coping mechanism, which was going to crack a joke to lighten the mood to get out of it. I'm like, let's make it funny.
Hold on, we're getting a little too Philly around
right?
here.
You're like, what was that? I'm like, really? Please keep going.
What this conversation is stemming from is we saw, me, and then I shared it with Steph. I saw, there's a podcast, another podcast. It's called, oh my goodness, Man Enough, the Man Enough podcast. And it was just a clip from that. It was just a reel where one of the hosts of the podcast was talking about how toxic it is she was referring to men in the clip. And, you know, as always, like reels never give the full picture of a conversation. It's always just a snapshot. And I'm sure that she either elaborated that it was more than just men or maybe she didn't. Maybe I'm putting words in her mouth. Anyways.
That's how the reel, not the podcast, right?
Yeah. And the idea is that men talk and intellectualize and think about their emotions to the detriment of society and to themselves as well. Because by negating the actual emotion and feeling the emotion and instead just trying to intellectualize it and speak about it, you're not just bypassing your own emotions, but you're also negating the rest of the world around you from theirs and creating an environment where, once again, emotions aren't even safe to be felt because, well, I talked about it. I don't need to feel it anymore. And that's my interpretation of the reel. So I definitely have my, you know, I added context to what it meant to me. And you could go watch it, or maybe you watched that same one and it didn't resonate, or you didn't have the same context, you don't have the same perception that I have. But that's what this conversation is stemming from, is how much we all tend to do that. And you and I both still do it on the regular.
Yeah.
Like every single day, we avoid emotion that is coming up inside of us in some capacity for any number of different reasons, right? We're too busy today. I don't have time to do it today. That one's too hard. I'm too sad. Or I'm really happy. I don't want to ruin today with some negative emotions, right?
Yeah.
All the
things. Like, things going so well.
Right?
I don't want to do this.
I don't want to think about this.
Right.
I don't want to talk about this.
We can do this tomorrow. Right now, the sun is out.
Yeah.
The sun is shining. The tank is clean.
Let's not talk about sad things.
Yeah.
And all of it is just the resistance of pushing away from those difficult emotions.
Yeah.
And then obviously we always have to throw in the caveat that it's not just the difficult emotions that we avoid feeling, right?
Yeah. If you avoid the difficult emotions, you avoid intense emotions.
What happens? Sorry, go ahead.
I'll just real fast, like intense emotions. And it can be intense difficult or intense happy. So big emotions are where you start to shut off. So really happy, you're like, whoop, bring it back down. Can't allow that. Really sad, whoop, bring it back down. Can't allow that. And so you have this thing of where you like pull keep everything in context and restrict yourself from really feeling the experience of life. And you're like, cool, I don't need to be that happy if that means I don't have to be that sad. I'm like,
right.
You can totally push out that happy, but
and that's what a lot of
can't push out that sad.
Like depression medication and anxiety medication
Right.
will do. It'll keep you in that nice little sweet spot in the middle where you're basically not experiencing anything.
Right.
Nothing too high, nothing too low. I was just imagining, like, I shouldn't say I don't, but when I spend time thinking about happy things and just letting my mind ruminate on the potential awesomeness of whatever an experience or, the next 5 years of our life, or like anytime I start to get too lost into that space, I have to bring it back.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh, don't think, like it becomes almost like that ego inside of me is making that even, too much. Don't feel that too much.
Don't feel that.
Don't get too happy there, motherfucker. Instead of just allowing it to, but it will gladly let me ruminate on anger, fear, shame, everything, as long as
what we
wants.
should think about?
Yeah.
Until you start to feel about it.
Yeah.
Think about it. Don't feel about it.
Definitely doesn't pull me out of that tailspin.
Yeah.
That's interesting too. So I think there's lots of reasons why we all do this.
Right.
And you're probably resonating if you're listening to this podcast in some capacity. And if you've got I want to talk to the inner critic as well that wants to, explain why we're wrong, because you've got all of your rebuttals. We'll speak to that in a minute. But I think some of the reasons why this happens, I think some of it's pretty obvious, right? Where emotions are not something that have been widely accepted up until, recent times.
What's the main reason?
To culture and society. I think it's survival.
Well, it makes you look
weak. Yeah.
And if you're weak, you're vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable, ties right to survival.
Exactly. I mean, from a very early, you know me, babe.
I know you.
I'm always going back to when we were climbing in trees and running around, hunting and gathering things. And there wasn't a lot of space and time to process your emotions.
I need a footstool under here.
During that, do you want one?
Sorry, that's fucking squirrel. I'm like, I want to kick back into this conversation, and I can't
lean back and throw your feet up top.
I'm not gonna put my feet up top.
Okay, but we'll get you.
Okay, sorry,
we'll get you a
caveman.
footstool.
Jumping through trees.
That's why we don't feel emotions, because it wasn't safe.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily from the context of the emotion isn't safe. It is taking the time to slow down and actually feel the emotion put you at risk.
Because back then it wasn't safe.
Yeah.
It totally wasn't. And there might be people might be experiencing parts of their lives right now. Same thing applies.
Yeah.
It's not safe. And we're definitely not communicating that if you were in an active threat to stop.
Yeah, stop. Slow down and just
feel
what's happening inside of you. Really just lean into
that
fear.
Move. Get yourself
what
to
is
safety.
That fear connected
get
to?
through. Right. But the majority, maybe not even the majority, the reality is that where you likely are, if you're listening to this podcast, where you likely are is in a space where you are not in that situation. And in this moment, you are not running for your life. And if you are, definitely don't listen to what we were saying. Just keep going. But we live that way. We still live like there's no time to fill. There's no time because it's one chaos after the next. There's one thing that we have to solve after another. I can't think of what.
One problem after
one problem, but it was one catastrophe after another. One thing that is everything's going to end if you don't take care of this thing. Everything's going to end. The whole thing is riding. Your entire existence is riding on this report or, this conversation or
email.
That, that thing you have to be accountable for because you messed up something and you have to be accountable. And now you have to figure out how to not be accountable and how you can make it better and slide over. And then how you can prevent the past, because we get so stuck with the past of how my entire existence isn't about where I am now. It's about making sure that never happens again. And if I relax, then that might happen again. So I'm not going to feel my feelings because I'm too busy making sure that never happens again. That was a big one for me.
Yeah.
And I can feel that building in my core. I'm I want to make sure that never fucking happens again. So I'm going to do everything I can to go crazy with that.
So there's definitely a component of why we don't feel our emotions that's connected to survival.
Yeah.
And I think we've made the case for that. What do you think are some other reasons why we avoid it? I think there's a big part of just like Western culture that's intellectual, right?
Yeah.
Where we're too busy thinking that we can solve all of our problems with our brains.
Well, yeah. Like, what do they tell you? Like, what were you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Like, really take your time and think about it.
Yeah.
Think. Weren't you using your head? Can't you think?
Can you imagine if that's what we were taught? Like if
Right?
we went to school and instead of like, what do you think about this problem?
What do you feel?
What do you feel? Like, what if they gave us the same
Right?
problems where they're like, Johnny bought 3 apples and then Susie came and took one from him. How many apples does Johnny have left? Like, what does that make you feel? And then we had to like slow down and actually,
Like, right?
That would be really interesting.
Like if they taught you how to get into your heart,
Yeah.
right? Because you get there eventually.
There's got to be an alternate dimension where that takes place.
Probably.
Where we're all emotional creatures
Right.
instead of intellectual creatures.
Right. And what if their realm is like, you got to get into your head?
Right.
Like,
They're all, we've
like,
got way
what
too
if we
much
taught in
feeling
school
going
and
on,
you were like
people.
actually able to intellectualize instead of walking around and just falling in love with every tree you see? I don't know. I want to try it.
We have these conversations where they're like, we need some math. We need to actually put 2 and 2 together.
You're like, and make a family. Like, I don't know. I'm doing better. Like, thank you, shadow work. Like, I feel like when
You're
things
doing better
come
when
up
it comes to this.
to grief and feeling, like to really like, now granted, like I said, I've had a lot of practice lately, but I've been in it. I've been in the trenches. It's been a rough round.
Yeah.
It's been a rough round, and I'm not keeping up with things. I'm not keeping up with texts. I'm not keeping up with to-dos.
The Joneses.
I'm not keeping up with the Joneses. Things are falling aside while I am in it. And it's okay that those things are falling aside. I'll pick them back up when I'm ready. Like, for instance, today I'm doing like well, and we're picking it up. This isn't when we would normally record the podcast, but I've got it today and I'm here. I'm showing up, and I'm showing up far greater today than I would have been if we would have done it like yesterday, or, you know, when I the capacity that I had to show up was not there.
Yeah.
I could have showed up and it would have just been junk, or maybe it would have been good, but I would have felt like crap. It would have been like terrible, and it would have just kept compounding. So I've been swimming in grief and pain and fear and sadness and working through it. And I'm not saying I'm doing it right, but having a lifelong of not doing, like, I'm doing it. I'm not worried about getting it right. I'm like doing it.
It's like you said earlier, there is no right way.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of my own words.
I heard once.
Right? Somebody
awesome
said this. But like, I'm in it. I'm really in it, and I'm really feeling, and for it to not get stuck in my body. And it's not fun. It sucks. But that's the part of it, is like sitting. And then I even started last night doing some questioning, because like it was like really big, and I was just like, what is happening? And I could feel the spin. So I just followed it. Why? This came up. And why am I feeling like I just like allowed it to take me on a journey, and was digging until I got to where I was. And just I let it like show me the path of where I needed to go instead of avoiding it. And like I still have my morning practice of where I'm working on happiness and gratitude and picturing the life. Like I am practicing the extremes. Like I'm practicing those really highs and changing things and allowing myself to see. And some mornings, like yesterday morning, I could not do it. And this morning, man, there were some beautiful things happening, because I'm not running from it all the way. I'm still like,
jogging from it.
Right? There's still some jogging, and there's some times that I just like totally possum, and I'm like, I can't do it. I'm just gonna play dead, and it'll keep going. Like, you know, when the bear's like, never mind, that's dead, I don't want it, kind of thing. I'm like, see if the feelings will just walk on by. But I'm practicing, and that's all we can do. That's all any of us can do, is keep practicing, keep trying. And you don't really give yourself, like, I didn't realize I was doing a good job until getting through it. And then I'm like, oh, I was doing really good feeling. Because when I was in it, I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, I was just like, I was in it.
Yeah.
And Like, it's like, don't judge yourself when you're in it. See how you got through it. Look at yourself on the other hand and be like, okay, what did I learn? What can I do? Which is in your head, right? But like, you can tell what you're feeling.
It's like trying to dry off when you're standing in a rainstorm,
Right?
instead of waiting until the rain
Right.
stops. And then you can dry off and be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I can see what happened there.
Right?
Otherwise, you're trying, oh, just everything's wet. I can't get dry. Yeah, you can't get dry because you're standing in the rain. So
Right.
you're feeling it right now.
You got to feel it, because our brains are beautiful. As much as they will trap you, our brains are beautiful. We have these amazing brains that can create so many incredible things and can like critical think and get us through things. But if we're never in our bodies, all we're doing is torturing our bodies. If we're never feeling it, we're just shoving it down and causing pain, sickness, issues that are just going to keep up and give our brains all of this chaos to spin. But when we allow our bodies the time, we allow our bodies to actually feel, then the message that we're getting from our bodies to our brain, the body-brain connection, allows our brains to be beautiful and to like do the, like to act instead of react, and to like, we're making choices on how we're going. It's a process. Like, this is all great right now. I'm like, man, I'm doing a good job. And then I'll walk out of the room and like fall into a pit or something. You know, it's just like they both exist, but we try so hard to completely eliminate.
Yeah.
That's what, I don't know what you think. So keep going. Okay.
Don't get nervous,
I
baby.
did. I totally got nervous. I kind of like, quit looking at me.
I was actively listening.
I know
to
you were. It got a little intense.
It's interesting when I think about, first and foremost, I wanted to mention, as you were talking, what came up for me too was I really wanted to highlight, not just highlight, but I really wanted, like, I want to come out and state as clearly as possible that I'm going to speak for myself rather than just for you, because oftentimes I'll do that where like, we believe, even though I know that you believe the same thing that I believe in regards to this, but I want to let you clarify that for yourself rather than just assuming it. Like 99% of what's going on inside of your body is because you're not allowing yourself to feel your emotions. That means that like your high blood pressure, your autoimmune disease, your overweight, your chronic back pain, your, wart on your left pinky toe, like everything that's taking place in your body is in one way connected to the repressed emotion that you aren't allowing yourself to feel or to be felt.
Yeah.
And that, I think, like if we really understood that game of have the experience, feel the emotion, get the relief, have the experience, feel the emotion, get the relief. Like just the ability to be in that flow and that connected. Hello, right? That would be so nice. We struggle with that still.
We do.
But
like we have this awareness, we know this, and we still like
still stay stuck in it.
Still stay stuck in it and still manifest shit in our bodies because it's hard.
And then still sit there and think like, I wonder why this is happening to my body. Instead of like literally your body's just going, hey, we should feel this thing. And we're like, hold on a minute. I'm pretty sure my my left knee's hurting right now. I probably twisted it coming up the stairs.
And like even like having the concept of what emotions are tied to that body, we think about it. Like, oh, okay, my knee, like I'm being stubborn. I'm not willing to bend and move. I'm like not being flexible and allowing myself to move forward. Like all that. You're like, okay, I need to be more flexible. I need to be able to move forward. I need to allow change. I need to not feel stagnant and stuck. I need to allow these emotions to flow. You're just like doing it all right here in your brain. Like I do that. I'm like, okay, release, really feel what's going on there. I need to nurture myself. Okay, nurturing. I'm doing it. I'm nurturing myself.
Gotta drink more water.
Right? It's like, it's so hard to get out of here and really allow it here.
Yeah.
Really allow it in your body. Really feel. It's like, I know all the things. Why can't I do all the things?
It makes me think even more about like the development of our brain because as I'm sitting here thinking about it, like the brain has a very specific role, right? It does something very specific. It does many things, but like overall we could just say it's like the operating system for this meat suit. And so it's It's doing all those tasks all the time, right?
Yeah.
And like you give the brain a task, cool, I can take that, I can take that, I can take that, I can take that. Eventually you'll become overwhelmed, but that's the emotion. The brain's like, I got all this shit squared away. I filed it away in the drawer of, where shit goes to die.
And then what do you do with that overwhelm?
Right? And so the brain will continually just do all of that work regardless. It doesn't care. It's like a non-feeling. That's why I think, and like this is silly, but how they can like do brain surgery without any, like your brain doesn't have any feeling sensations.
Right?
It doesn't have any nerve endings.
That's not silly. That is profound. And I have never made that connection.
Right. Because your brain isn't designed to feel. It's designed just to process. And so it's got a very, like I said, very specific job of keeping us alive. And it evolved that way, where eventually our brains had to expand and we had to problem solve and make fire and everything like that. But that's all the brain does. Just keep this meat suit moving forward. And then enter in the soul. And the soul is all about emotion.
Yeah.
And it doesn't process anything the way that the brain does. It's not designed that way.
Yeah.
It's designed to process the energy that comes from this lived experience of being in this meat suit. Like, that's the process, right? That's the one and the two that combine to make this thing here, where you have to have both of them to kind of coexist and operate together, but not one is supposed to overtake the other.
Right.
Like, part of the existence of coming here and being in these like meat suit bodies of ours is to have the real effect of everything, to be able to touch things and smell things and hear things in this dimension. And then our soul is all just about feeling and emotion and love. But that's the place that it comes from. So it comes here to blend with the brain and to blend with the body and to have this lived experience and the ability to process emotion in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Right? Because we get the full spectrum of emotional processing here on this realm and in this planet, but we just stay stuck in our heads because it's what has gotten us this far. Like, we figured out how to make fire. We figured out whatever, right? Whether you want to, like, it doesn't really matter what you believe. Yeah. Eventually, at some point, humans figured out something and got us to this place. And so now, can we balance both of those things? That's the key, right? That's the ticket. As always, it comes back to balance. Can you get into your body and feel the emotions? And deal with, and when I say deal with, like, we think, okay, every time we have this conversation, both with ourselves as well as like when we talk to other people about it, it's like, the fix is in the feel. Like, you have to go through the process of feeling your emotions. And they're like, what does that mean? Like, that's your brain. And then they're like, okay. Or like, you just have to feel it. And they're like, how? And I'm like, that's your brain. And they're like, okay. So explain it to me again. No, that's your brain. Like, all you have to do is feel it. The solution is the feel. But then what do I do after? That's your brain. You don't need it. You can just turn it off. Quite literally, you can just feel the emotion, feel the overwhelm, feel the anger, feel the sadness, feel the pain, feel the joy, feel the happiness, feel all of these things. And there is no and then what? There is no feel it so then I can heal it. There is no like, it's just literally what happens. And it will wait patiently for its turn.
Right.
I've got emotions that have been waiting for 38 years inside of my body. And they're like, I'm not going anywhere. We're good. We'll hang out here in your belly as long as you want. Eventually we'll come to the surface and be felt. Or you will die. That emotion will be released back into the universe to eventually ride the wave again.
Oh my goodness.
That's all it is. I think we solved it.
I think so.
What do you think? Get it?
I get it.
What do you feel right now?
Like, I'm just like sitting with this and like really tying in, thinking about how much our body actually like controls our brain. Like, our body tells our brain what to do. And we're thinking that our brain tells our body what to do. And like, yeah, there's the whole like coexistence of them. But what our body needs is what sends signals to the brain that releases and supplies. The body needs oxygen. The brain like goes through and tells the body to breathe, the heart to beat, like all of the things, to go pee, all these sensations that are coming up from the body's need. So like the body, like it's just crazy. I'm just like sitting here like really thinking about I spent a lot of time in my head. like very, very young, disassociate, get out of my body, go someplace else in my head. And then when we started to like really dive in and I learned how to move energy, I learned how to get out of my body, I learned how to connect. I was like, grounding was something that I never, ever wanted to do. I never wanted to be in my body. They're like, here, I'm going to ground you. And I'm like, fuck that. Can't catch me. I'm going to stay up here in the ethers. Like, don't try to ground me.
Oh, God. You're going to need to come back to your body. No,
right?
not.
The hell I do.
I see what you're doing right now. I'll be back when you're gone.
Right. And I never like, that was such a hard thing. And so just like really learning slowly, first of all, that it's safe to be in my body and to trust my body and to feel the things that are coming up is like, it's practice. It's like we're sitting here telling people, you got to get in your body, but we're not saying, yeah, right now, that's all you got to like practice. It's hard. It is hard.
Well, that leads me to the part where it's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Right? Everybody might be listening or somebody's listening to this and saying like, yeah. And what? Right.
Yeah. How?
Tell me that's my brain. That's great, fucker. Now what?
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how to do what
you just gave me more shit to think about.
Exactly. More things that I'm failing at and not able to do. Cool. I'll put that on my checklist of fuck off. I'm never getting that finished. I'm a failure and I'll go back to just surviving.
Or like I'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
My to-dos like, okay, yes, get in my body.
Put that on my self-help to-do list that never gets addressed.
Which one? Because there's 46 in different locations. Speaking for myself.
I love all your lists.
I have lists. I have binders, electronical.
I make fun of you because you've got like all of them. And I do the same thing. I was thinking about it the other day where I've got like 3 or 4 different places that I put reminders. A couple on my phone.
I think I've got 3 or 4 places in this room.
I know. You're a little bit more extreme. And I love how you have to have a new notebook. You're like, this notebook is going to be the thing.
When something happens and it's a new thing, I don't like mixing it with old shit. I like it to have its place, its thing. It's like, yeah.
Okay. So what do you do with this information?
Put it in a notebook.
Get yourself a good notebook.
Right?
Design it and make sure that the cover's perfect.
Metallic Sharpies are fucking awesome.
And then you're going to file that notebook somewhere in your house and it's going to be located in the place that you'll remember it and then it'll disappear.
Why are you talking to me right now?
Okay. If you have awareness, the thing that we always highlight, trying to do anything about this situation, trying to feel any emotions, trying to heal, trying to step into this space where you want to start doing things and get out of your head and get into your body, cannot take place when your environment is not safe.
Yes.
And that might look like an abusive relationship. That might look like a toxic job. That might look like you can't pay your rent. That might look like you live with your in-laws. That might look like any number of different things in order to create an environment when you're in a constant activated state.
Yeah.
So you have to take steps first and foremost to change your environment. Now, if you can't make changes in the long run, if you can't suddenly move out of that place, or you can't end the toxic relationship immediately, like all of these things that you can't necessarily just switch immediately, we get, right?
Yeah.
That's not the reality of it. So it's not saying like, oh, it's easy, just fix your environment and then you can start healing. We understand that's not the case. But what you have to start doing is creating windows and spaces of safety where you can start healing. Because like Steph said, it takes an immense amount of practice.
Yeah.
So overall, you need to create an environment that's safe for yourself and for your little inner child and everything to kind of start to heal. But in the beginning, if you can't do a big overhaul, you're going to create and find windows of opportunity and little tiny spaces in your day and in your life, and wherever you can create those for yourself to where you can actually slow down and start to feel some emotion. And that looks like maybe every day on my lunch break, I take a walk through the park and there's this bench that I sit on and it's just me and nature and nobody else. That might look like I'm in my closet with all the lights off and I'm hiding because that's the only place that I am safe and things are quiet. It might look like the drive home where I can zone out and relax and listen to music and have wind blowing in my hair. All of these little environments and all of these little spaces that you can create for yourself is how you start to create the bigger overarching picture of, okay, my environment is really safe now, or safer, or safe enough to where I can start feeling and going into some of these things that come up. Otherwise, you're in an activated state consistently, which means you don't have the full capacity to do all of the work that needs to take place. So we've done episodes in the past, and it's pretty common knowledge that like when you're in an activated fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, your entire body is dysregulated. Your frontal cortex, you're not thinking clearly and rationally. You just don't have your full capacity. And you have to start to build an environment where that can start to dissipate and slow down, and you can start to regulate your nervous system so that you can actually start bringing online everything else that you need to start feeling and creating safety and healing and all these kind of different things. So that's the really, really big first step. And we fully acknowledge that it's an incredibly challenging step that looks different for everybody.
Yes.
What your safe environment looks like is only for you and you alone. And so you have to just do the best that you can in small little incremental steps to create and find safety, to start healing until you can then heal the big picture and get to safety in order to start feeling. That felt like a big rant.
Oh, that was beautiful. I'm so glad you broke it down like that to really, like, you did a really good job. Like, and I'm really, I know that was such a crucial thing for me on my journey with that too, is like those little moments, those little things. And it's really hard because you want to get to safety. You want to get to that, and you have big picture in mind, and anything other than big picture feels like failure and feels like not doing it. So those tiny steps are how I got here. Those itty bitty tiny steps that took a long time. I had to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going, and finding those little moments of safety and changing my environment little by little by little by little by little to get here. And now I can look back and see, like, this is like, I'm a completely different life. Like, I can't even recognize where I was before. Like, I can still feel it, and I still have to feel through a lot of things. But those tiny, tiny steps are what happened. And if you're still here, you still have the opportunity to make a tiny step. You still are there, because, like, yes, the whole like tomorrow is not guaranteed thing, but you are here right now, and you can make this shift, because you might be here in the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment. And it's those tiny, tiny things that take you through that progress through one day. And it's so hard because we want it right now, and you deserve it right now. You do. And it's really, really hard that it's not right now. But one day it will be right now. Your one day will be your right now. And maybe you've changed your life completely because you've taken those tiny steps and you've allowed your body to feel, and you're moving through life completely different. And if you haven't, and if you look back and you're in the same space, that's okay, because you're still here, and you can take that tiny step right now. You can always take that tiny step.
Yeah, and it always looks different.
Always.
Like, my little steps look different than your little steps.
Right.
And how I got to this. But that's the key. Like you said earlier, like, you've got this big picture in mind, and then if you can't just flip and make that big picture happen, then you're just a failure. Mm-hmm. And then you're staying stuck in all of these patterns and all of this toxic mindset, beliefs, all of these different things that will just stew in over and over and over and over again for years. Mm-hmm. It's like, how do I get out of this? I can't, because I can't pay for therapy. I can't afford this. I can't do that. Mm-hmm. I can't leave my partner, because then what about the kids? I can't. All of the things that we throw in front of ourselves to keep us in these spaces, we get it. And all we're saying is, in order to start healing from those things, you have to first feel safe. And if safety to you is like, there's just no way in hell I'm ever going to feel safe, we get that as well. Like, we understand that sometimes it's that extreme where you're like, fuck off, I'll never feel safe, especially in my body, because of whatever's happened and whatever you've gone through.
And whatever is still happening right now, what my life is right now. Yeah.
And if you just like trust in small little incremental changes and get super curious about where are the little windows of safety that you can start finding and seeking out and creating for yourself. An extra 2 minutes in the shower by yourself. Mm-hmm. all of those things are how you eventually create and build up enough courage and strength and confidence in yourself so that when it comes time to really make the big shifts so that you alter the entire environment of your life into a safer place and into like literally a new dimension of safety that you couldn't have even imagined, it starts with all of those little tiny things.
Yes.
That's how we accomplish it.
Yes.
And then the healing almost happens naturally at that point, right? It's like your nervous system takes this huge, deep breath. Subconsciously, it just goes and relaxes. And immediately shit starts coming to the surface to be felt. Immediately you'll start crying. Immediately things start coming up to be addressed because it's the natural process. You can't do it when you're activated.
Right.
You have to slow down in order for healing to take place. And you can't slow down until you feel safe.
You had a really good metaphor for me too that helped me when like practicing this. Because when you've been repressing a lot, it's like a hose, like you've got that hose kinked. And so as soon as you start to feel, it's like when you first unkink the hose, it just like shoots a shit ton out. You're like, that's too much. It's going everywhere. And so then your instinct is to kink it again, to stop it. But if you just let that flow for a minute, and then it regulates. And then it's the pressure that you have it turned on for. It's wherever you're at. So if you start to allow this and it just kind of like flood your system, like sometimes that's going to how you're going to flood your system. You're going to flood your system, but then it's going to regulate. So it's okay. Allow yourself the opportunity to regulate. Allow the pressure to have its like big release and then regulate to where you're at the flow that you want to be. I saw this meme. I love memes. Okay. I love memes, but I saw this one. You know how sometimes they hit just a little different. It was on Instagram, the self-care wall one. I just love that one. It had a picture of 2 calendars and one had dates like X'd out sporadically on it. And the other one had just the first square marked. And it was beautiful. And it said, what feels better, to be marking off 1 days or day 1? And I was like, fuck yeah, day 1. Day 1.
Right.
Because it's always like, I've never ever looked at it that way. It's always like I look at and like how far I have to go. This is where I'm going. This is where I'm going. By this date,
we're going to need to be
right here, by this date here. And it's like setting yourself up for failure because you're already judging yourself by the end goal. When you're at day 1, you haven't even hit day 1. Like how can
goal hasn't even happened.
It hasn't, like your baby step hasn't even happened, but you're judging yourself here and holding that. But if you just like look at like, what do I need to accomplish today? If you can like really like day 1 starts to progress into day 2, into day 3 and day 4, as where end goal only is 1 day, which just keeps getting moved all around.
I like that.
I liked it a lot. I'm like day 1.
Right.
Day 1.
So you can mark your calendar.
Day 1's beautiful.
Today's the day where you started your journey into trying to create a safer environment for you to start healing. You started today. You opened up and pushed play on a podcast that led you down this rabbit hole and planted a seed inside of you to where, okay, I'm going to start doing it today. Yeah. Today's the day that I begin. And then you just open up and hope for the best. Hope for the best. That's a terrible line. Hope for the best and plan for the worst. No, you can just trust that everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We believe in you. And you can reach out. And we can totally cheer you up. Like, you get people to be like, fuck yeah, you did. Day 1. High five you.
Support. That was the other big thing.
Support.
And again, right, we're so programmed to avoid help. Help isn't safe. All of those things are definitely applicable. And help doesn't have to look like, especially in like today's, environment or in the world today, help doesn't have to look like actually reaching out to somebody and say, will you help me? Help can look like listening to a podcast. It can be reading a book. It can be, watching a documentary. Like there's so many different avenues where you can seek and get help that don't necessarily have to be therapy or reaching out to somebody or even asking, somebody to, like, those are levels of help, but just getting curious and inquiring about what you can start shifting and changing for yourself. And then, because literally somebody created that, like you are getting help by going and consuming things with the intention of seeking something for yourself. That's an act of self-love as well as reaching out for help. So don't judge yourself thinking that, help doesn't feel safe. Asking somebody for help might not feel safe.
And maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have somebody in your life that you can ask right now.
But does reading a book feel okay? If you don't have time for a book, does, going down the TikTok rabbit hole, does that feel safe? That's help. Finding people that you resonate with, following their content, consuming the love and the message and all the things that they're giving you in a sense to help you see better who you are and why you are. And all of that stuff is help. So if you're doing that, you're already getting help. Yeah. So you're already doing a good job.
You're doing a really good job.
There's one baby step that you can lean into and recognize that you're doing a great job at. And then you just follow that to the next and to the next and to the next. And you'll probably get to some point on your journey where actually reaching out and asking for somebody will feel safe. It probably will be scary, but it will feel safe and you will feel safe enough to do it. So that's another big part of it too, where you got to ask for help. Super important. Any other thoughts? As always, there's always 1,000 more things we could say about it, right? But anything that comes up for you, anything that
not this time. Quit asking me.
Hold on, let me rephrase the question a few more times. Okay, we are on to the part of the podcast where this is like one of our favorite parts, is where we get to answer questions.
Yeah.
Because it's fun to both hear and see what you've got. We love getting questions.
And I love the variety that we get them. We get them DMs, comments, we get them voicemails. That's right. Call us.
Yes.
423-521-0355.
Do you have the number memorized yet?
No, it's on this paper.
Okay. We should get it tattooed on her.
I even have .love written down, so I remember to spell it out, because our website is energyisLove.love.love. We're so programmed to hit .com, and that's not. No,
it's not where we're at. We're not at the comms. We're at the loves.
We're at the loves.
Anyways, so each episode we answer a question. We can answer your question on the next episode if you call in and leave a voicemail. This week we have a question. Hold on, it takes me a minute to make sure that I get it playing right.
I guess my question is, and my name is Debbie, and yes, you can play it on a podcast if you like. I lost 2 children. I lost my dog, and my boyfriend of 22 years cheated on me, all within the last 4 years. I'm a Taurus, so I'm, a badass, and I will eventually get through this, but I just don't know. There are days where these traumas are just unbearable, and I do work with the shadow work, and I guess my question is I know I'll never get over this, but I think I find myself just snap a finger and I'm just so moody. And I don't know if it's just grief. I don't really know how to pose a specific question at this time, but I just don't know how to manage emotional stability, I think, considering all that I've been through. Thank you.
Debbie, oh my gosh.
Right. I'll take a moment to send you some love.
Thank you.
Totally deserve.
Thank you for the question and reaching out.
Yeah.
And like you said, it sounds like not only have you been through a lot in the last little bit, but it sounds like there's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot that you've had to endure and go through.
That's an amount of pain and grief and loss that, you've hit worst fears ever. That's what you've experienced in the last 4 years. That's intense.
It is intense. Some really big emotions.
Yeah.
We just want to honor you first and foremost, like Steph said. We're sending a lot of love because it's a nightmare, I'm sure. And
can't even imagine.
Yeah. So just to speak to, this is going to maybe come off. I don't want to just speak to this from that analytical brain position of this is what you should do and this is what we recommend doing. However, there is a component of it where I'm going to articulate that, fully acknowledging that it's not easy, right? But the reality is, and you hit upon it, there's an immense amount of grief.
Yes.
There's grief that has to be felt. And we can either choose to fill it or we can choose to store it. And it will stay in our bodies for as long as we want to keep it there until we allow it to be felt and to sit with the grief and the sadness and the pain and the loss and everything else that grief brings up for us. So that's the solution, right? How do I get through this process? Like, how do I find emotional stability again? That need of stability, of getting to that place where everything kind of feels safe and regulated again. It might take a really long time to get back to that place, or even to find that place to start with. But the path to that, where you can create that and feel that stability again, or maybe for the first time, is by feeling through the grief and the sadness and everything else that comes up. And nobody wants to hear that. Like, I know that that's such a shitty answer to the question of like, what do I do with this? Like, the reality is you have to feel it, and you have to sit with it, and you have to allow it to just go through your body, and for your heart and soul and your mind and everything to go through that experience of healing that takes place when you do sit with grief. Because it's going to give you what's next. It's going to give you the insight and the confidence and the courage and everything else that you need to get through it. But you have to overcome the big fear of what if. Now that's like the intellectual aspect, and the answer to your question is that's what needs to be done. And then the reality of it is that's incredibly difficult to do. It's really, really hard. And it's one of those things that we always recommend getting help with, because trying to navigate the weight of all of that stuff that you're trying to navigate is just too much for one person to try to do by themselves.
Yeah.
And most of us weren't taught how to do it, which is why we store it and stuff it and avoid it and don't want to fill it. So whatever that help looks like for you, maybe it was reaching out to this podcast and asking this question. And I wish we had like a really good, solid fix for it that we could just say, yeah, do this one thing and all of it's going to magically go away. But you would know that that was bullshit.
Yeah.
Because it does literally look like just being able to sit through the grief of it all. And if you can't, that's okay too.
Yeah.
There's a space here where hopefully you can acknowledge that whatever your capacity is on any given day is okay. And that's an important thing too, right? Processing grief and going through really difficult emotions looks different for everybody. And so whatever that looks like for you is okay. And if you can do a lot on one day and you can't do any on the next day, or if it takes you months or years, that's okay. But when the time is right and when everything coalesces inside of you in a sense, I believe that you will get through it.
Yeah.
You will find your way through it, because I think that's what we naturally eventually do, even though it might take a really long time. So again, our hearts go out to you.
Yeah.
Debbie, that's a really tough experience to go through, and we hope that you are getting help. Anything else that you want to add, babe?
Like, I don't even know, like, my instinct is like, I want to wrap you up in the biggest hug in the world and just like send you this slight emotional hug where you don't have to do anything. You can just allow yourself to fall in a million pieces and just know that somebody's got the pieces for you. And when you're ready, all your pieces are there, and then you can stand up again. The amount of grief that we feel shows like how much we love and what the loss that you have had to experience. Like, there's, in my mind, that is the ultimate grief. So processing that and navigating that, and like you said, it is a grief to go through. There will come a time, who knows when. It is different for everybody. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. Maybe it'll be in 4 years. Maybe it'll be in 8 years. Maybe it'll be next week. There's no time. There is just no time for that. So allowing yourself to be exactly where you are today, and knowing that where you are today is the exact perfect place for you to be, even if you absolutely hate the place where you are today. Because this is a process that is a very, very unique thing to have to experience in this amount of time. So you started out by reaching out here. We don't know what your support looks like and where you're at. encourage you to keep reaching out. And even like there's support, right? And you're like, oh yeah, support groups. I don't want to hear that. But there is some like really cool online ones where sometimes just being around people that understand from their experience, they can relate in a sense. And you don't even have to say anything. You don't have to say anything until you're ready. And maybe you're ready to say all the things. And then we encourage you, use that voice. When you're ready to speak and express what you're feeling, let the world hear you. Let the world hear you. It feels like that might be a poll. I don't know if that resonates at all, but let the world hear you.
Thank you, Debbie. Again, we answer questions every episode, and you can call those in. The number is 423-521-0355, and that number is in the show notes. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We absolutely love doing the podcast week after week, and we've got a ton of support recently, and we really, really appreciate it. If you follow us on Facebook, thank you so much. If you are brand new to the podcast and you really dig it and you want to just continually support the podcast, one of the best things that you can do to do that is go like it and subscribe, and even go the extra mile and leave a review if you really love the podcast. All of those things help immensely and help us reach more listeners, as well as just share some of the things that we talk about all the time, week after week. So thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for listening. And we're deeply grateful. You want to say goodbye? Close us out, babe.
Have a good day. I was not prepared. I was in my head. Thank you for listening. Until next time.
Adios, muchachos.
Be well. Drink water. Love you.